Okay, moving on to the last of our 6 oral presentations. It's been presented by James Waggitt, and he's going to talk about a combination of empirical and model data sets reveals associations between deep diving seabirds and oceanographical processes at fine spatial temporal scales in a high energy habitat.
Thanks for that, Ben. In hindsight, a rather long title, but I'm sorry for that. Yes, so today I'm going to present some results from the NERC flowback and response projects concerning the interaction between seabirds and tidal stream turbines. So just at this stage, I'd like to thank all of my various helpers here, and I hope I've got you all included. So as we know, the impact of tidal stream turbines on seabird populations is relatively unknown, and as we found out from today and yesterday, one of the main threats we think is the risk of collisions between deep diving seabirds like auks and cormorants and tidal stream turbines. So one of the parts of estimating risk is determining the spatial overlap between these populations and the locations of turbines in these tidal path habitats. So the aim of this project is simply to understand and then predict the seabird foraging distributions within these tidal path habitats. So at this stage, it's just important to note that these are very complex habitats, both in the seascape and also in the hydrodynamics. So this is our study site, which is the Ford of Warness in Orkney, UK. It's a typical tidal path habitat, and it's characterised by very strong bidirectional currents. So in flood tides, the currents go from south to north and then from north to south on the ebb. There's very, very complex topography, so there's islands and headlands and skerries. And there's also very, very complex bathymetry, so steep slopes and changing depth, etc. And then interactions between these fast currents and these seascape features create a range of different micro habitats within the Ford of Warness. So here you can see the ebb and flood tides, and then 3 different measures of hydrodynamics on the right, and these have been sourced from a FVCOM model. So you can see there on the ebb tide you get upwelling to the north of the site and downwelling to the south. But then obviously when the tides turn on the flood, the location of these features changes. Again with the turbulence, so the second one down, again it changes between the flood and the ebb. And with the speed as well, you tend to see slightly higher speeds on the ebb tide. But there's not only the flood and ebb cycle, which happens every 12 hours, there's also a neap and spring tide cycle, in which the speed of the current changes over a 2-week cycle. And this obviously has subsequent impacts on the extent of these features. So you can see there, this is for an ebb tide. You can see the extent and the intensity of these features changes between a neap and the spring. So generally the higher currents in the spring tide result with more intense and widespread features. So we are seeing here quite a complex and diverse habitat which changes consistently on a spring neap and an ebb flood tide cycle. So to understand the seabird distributions within this site, we have to try and make links between these physical features and where we're seeing foraging seabirds. So we know that suitable physical conditions can promote the availability of prey to seabirds. So we've got suitable physical conditions, increased prey availability, and that results with the presence of foraging seabirds. But unfortunately in these sites, measuring the distribution and abundance of prey offers significant challenges which we are still attempting to overcome. So although it's not ideal, we can sort of make the assumption that where there's suitable physical conditions, there's a chance of seeing foraging seabirds. So although these predictions might not be spot on, they should give us a general idea of when and where to expect foraging seabirds. So to do this, we need to supplement the FVCOM model outputs and the measurements of seabird characteristics that I've shown previously with some fine-scale measurements of seabird distributions in these sites over a range of tidal states, but also over a range of seasons, because we could expect differences in behaviour between breeding and non-breeding seasons. So to collect the seabird distributions, we performed 103 vessel transect surveys in the fall of Warness in May, so in the breeding season, and in October, so the non-breeding season, and in 2012 and 2013. We used zigzag transit routes against the currents, and as well as this means that the boat travels at a suitable speed for recording seabirds, it also means that we're not recording the same birds twice as they drift down with the currents. So using this method, we estimate that we can get the position of seabirds in these sites accurate to several hundred metres, which is suitable for the sort of scales of these features. So we saw 4 abundant deep diving species in the site, and these have quite different behaviours and ecology. So here you'll see a hopefully nice picture of them on the right, and on the left just all the sightings of these seabirds during these 102 transects. So this is the Atlantic puffin, and we know that these feed primarily within the water column, and these were present during May, so during the breeding season. Then got the common guillemot, which we know also feeds primarily in the water column and is also present during the breeding season. So these 2 species are exclusively on the site during the breeding season. We've then got the black guillemot, which we know is different to the other 2 in that it feeds on the seabed, and these are present through that breeding and non-breeding season. And the European shag, which, as the black guillemot, feeds on the seabed and is present during May and October, so the breeding and non-breeding season. So we've got our seabird abundances for the various months. We've got our physical conditions. So we chose speed, turbulence and upward current, so upwelling or downwelling. But we also had a measurement of seabed, because for the species feeding on the seabed, it's probably an important factor driving their distribution. And because this is, we use these factors, so the seabed abundances is the response variable, and the explanatory variables are the environmental factors. But because we know there's going to be variations among seasons and among years and over time, we use a general linear mixed effect model to test these associations between the seabirds and the physical conditions, because this allows us to include a time random variable. So it allows us to take into account all the temporal variation and focus on the features of interest, which is the environmental variables. We then throw it all into a model and it just do its job using a Poisson distribution, and then we select the best models using p-values. So we only retain the environmental variables in the final model that are statistically significant. And then we can use the model coefficients to predict seabird distributions over a range of tidal states and a range of seasons within the fall of Warness. So this was the model outputs. So the first thing to note is that there's definite variations in microhabitat associations among species. So different species are favouring slightly different areas within the site. We see strong seasonal variations in the species that are present throughout the breeding and non-breeding season. We see variations in microhabitat association complexities. So, for example, here the common guillemot in the summer is only associated with speed, but the black guillemot is associated with all 4 factors. But then we do see some general patterns. So for the species feeding on the seabed, they're always associated with soft, rough substrate. So this could have implications on a sort of wider scale, in that it's saying that if you put turbines in areas with a soft, rough substrate, there's a good chance that the benthic foragers will be found there. And for the pelagic foragers, the ones feeding in the water column, they're always associated with fast speed. So this is again saying that in most sites where there's fast speeds, there's a good chance that there's going to be pelagic foragers, and obviously the fast speeds are where the turbines are going to be. So what we can do now is use these predictions from the models to make nice maps showing microhabitat preferences for a range of species in the fall of Warness. So for the puffins, just to note that the black lines are areas where turbines are likely to be found. So areas inside that are defined as turbine habitats, and areas outside the black lines are non-turbine habitats. What we see here is predictions for a flood, ebb and spring leap cycle. 0 is no habitat preference, so no microhabitat preference, and 1 is a strong microhabitat preference. And what we see here is an increase during ebb tides, but a strong increase during spring tides. So it's saying that the spatial overlap is highest during spring tides and during the ebb tide. Similar situation for the common guillemots, where we see an increase in the ebb tide and a strong increase in the spring tide. So it's saying that the spatial overlap is highest in the spring ebb tide. For the black guillemot in the summer, there's a very, very high specialisation in sites near headlands and islands, which are characterised by high turbulence, downwelling and complex seabeds. So in this case, you can say in the summer, there's very little chance of a black guillemot encountering a turbine within the turbine area. But in the winter, we see a completely different story. So there's a massive range expansion in the site. They tend to move into fast water and occupy a wide range of microhabitats. So you can say that there's moderate spatial overlap in this case. European shag, very similar to the black guillemot in the summer, in that they tend to favour areas of high turbulence near islands with complex seabeds. And again, you can say here that there's very little chance of a European shag encountering a turbine. And similar to the black guillemots in the winter, we see a range expansion, but the shags seem to be tied a bit more to the areas of complex seabed near the coastline. So we can sort of say that in the winter there's low spatial overlap for European shags as well. So what we've got now is a range of predictions for a range of species. We can highlight those which are most... should have said for the last two, there's very little impact on the flood ebb spring leap cycle. So what we've got now is a range of predictions, and the conclusions are that there are differences in associations among species and within species over time, and there's various ecological reasons for this, but I think the main point at the moment is it's highlighting which and when species are most likely to forage near turbines. So for the puffins and the common guillemots, it's looking that there is high spatial overlap anyway, but this increases during ebb and spring tides. For the black guillemots and the European shags, those feeding on the seabed, it looks like there's low spatial overlap in the summer, but during the winter, especially for the black guillemot, this increases. So it's highlighting when these species are most likely to encounter turbines. And although there's likely to be site-specific patterns, we think that the microhabitat associations here are probably going to be useful in sites elsewhere. So this is the first stage towards building towards an estimate of spatial overlap at population levels. That's me done. I'd like to thank all these people here who've helped me in my work for the last few years. Cheers.
James, we've got a couple of minutes for a couple of questions. Tom.
Did you ground truth the student Roxanne got
So that was stored from a UK60 using the Roxanne software. So it wasn't at all ground truth now.
You don't know what that, you sort of said it was soft, rough.
Okay, so what I should explain is that the Roxanne software gives you a measurement of soft and hard, but you can't actually determine what sort of sediment that is without doing an actual grab sample.
So you don't know what the soft, rough, soft is?
Don't know what it is, but it's sort of implying a more diverse seabed, but it's not hard and smooth, for example.
Okay, Digger had a question.
Yeah, but presumably you restricted the analysis to only birds on the water, flying birds.
Yes. Yeah.
But those birds that were on the water, if I'm right in thinking you weren't actually able to be certain they were feeding, they were just on the water.
We have got behavioural observations, so we do know what birds are diving and not diving. But unfortunately, the percentage of birds that are actually diving is so small that we can't do much with that at all.
But
So
I suspect that in the case of black guillemot and shag, in the breeding season, proximity to small breeding colonies, probably on Green Home Island, might be skewing your
That is possible. We did exclude all birds within sort of 200 metres of those areas. So we're hopeful that we have excluded all the ones that are not feeding and just loafing around on the edge.
Splendid. Okay. So as folks set up for the elevator pitches, I'd like to thank our 6 speakers for their fun-time contribution.